I think it's far more practical to consider levying individual fines on the person, not on the office, until they comply. The courts use that practice. I think it's quite successful.
And you're talking about a big number.
Yes, yes. Well, you could fine someone $25,000 a day until they comply, and that will probably get their attention.
And can you do that?
We can do that, but if there is going to be this across-the-board stonewalling, we're going to have to consider extraordinary remedies.
Wow, House Intel Committee Chairman Adam Schiff talking about the next potential step for Democrats fighting a White House more committed to stonewalling than transparency. And Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler told reporters just a few hours ago that talks to have Mueller testify before that committee are ongoing.
It won't be next week, but we're negotiating with him.
Okay. Do you think
we're talking with him in the Justice Department?
Are you committed to having? I mean, are you sure that Mueller will come before your committee? Will you
I'm not going to comment on that at this point.
Is there any benefit?
Well, excuse me. Let me change that. He will come at some point. If necessary, we'll subpoena him, and he'll come.
Is there any benefit in waiting until it's a private citizen and not an employee of the DOJ?
Is there a benefit? No. He may prefer to do that because he's then more free from the instructions of the Department of Justice. But that should be only a matter of weeks anyway.
Joining our conversation, former Time Magazine managing editor and MSNBC political analyst Rick Stengel. Rick, your thoughts on this sort of extraordinary moment, this extraordinary standoff between the White House and Congress about so many consequential things?
Yes, I mean, the fact is the executive branch is basically not entertaining any of the offers and compliances that are necessary to the legislative branch. It's kind of unheard of, which is why you have the two chairmen saying we have to go to extraordinary remedies that had existed a long time ago. I mean, the House basically had this subpoena power and the ability to punish people who didn't answer the subpoena power, and that existed through the 30s and 40s, and then it kind of waned. But they should bring it back. I mean, in the sense that I don't think there's a constitutional crisis. There's a constitutional crisis if the executive branch doesn't comply and there's no remedy for it. This is the remedy that could actually solve the crisis.
What? The fines?
The fines, the punishment, the imprisonment. I mean, all of these things are possible.
So you think that the Congress needs to accelerate?
Yes, I mean, there's been a decline in Congress's power for, I don't know, the last 100 years, and a rise in executive power, right? And then, and the problem is this rise in executive, the unitary power of the executive, combined with a president who has autocratic tendencies. That's the very big danger. That's why Congress needs to beef up and use all of the authority that it has to compete against the executive branch.
It's a slippery slope, though, because let's say Congress obviously is always going to be politically driven by one party. So now you're giving a party the ability to imprison, and that's dangerous also. So look, nobody wants to see the Republicans
it's the institution. It's not a party,
but it's a politically driven institution at all times, and that's.
Let's get the person who was in that.
Yes, right.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, look, I'm an institutionalist, and I think after the SDNY matter, Nancy Pelosi owed it to the country to open an impeachment investigation right then, because the president was named in a criminal conviction of Michael Cohen. I also think
the president today is an unindicted co-conspirator in an illegal hush money scheme
that was entered into judgment. And this is how it's different than John Edwards. John Edwards was found not guilty. Michael Cohen pled guilty, and Donald Trump is named in that guilty plea. So are we just going to allow the president to commit small crimes?
That's a big one.
That's a big one, right? And this goes to the campaign finance violation. I actually think I put it out in 14 tweets last night. You can impeach the president in the mere length of a tweet thread based on what's already in the Mueller report. I think where Congress needs to get more aggressive.
Why haven't they?
Honestly, because Nancy Pelosi was Speaker once before, and she presided over the greatest loss in House seats of any majority since World War II, 63 seats. It was a disastrous end to her speakership. And fairly for her, I think she's reflecting on that. And she knows this may be politically unpopular, and so she's waiting for it to become more politically popular.
And it's moving in that direction. Impeachment has gone, I think, from 40 to 45% in the last 2
But
weeks.
It shouldn't matter. If it was
I agree with you.
It shouldn't matter.
Could we have this conversation? Because
Please.
I think that it shouldn't matter. I think the fact that impeachment is unpopular is all the cover the Democrats need to simply do the right thing.
Because you're also defending the House of Representatives by holding the president accountable. You're not just requiring better fitness of the occupant of the White House. You're saying that as a Congress, the Constitution gives us this authority we are obligated to use. I understand she doesn't want to do it. But if you're an institutionalist who sees the viewpoint of the institution of the House and not the political party in charge, you don't have any option. I think what they should do is set a deadline and say on July 1, the House Judiciary Committee is taking a vote whether or not to open an impeachment investigation or not. And guess what? All these witnesses were asking to come. If you want to join us for that conversation and testify before then, we'd love to hear from you.
But
if not, we're taking the vote.
Let me just add our two law enforcement voices to the conversation, because I think if you head down this road, I think the political frame around impeachment, which is a political process, and I understand why there's a political frame around it, but I think it's a toxic conversation absent considerations about the rule of law and what that means in this country. Frank, you and I started this conversation at the beginning of the week. If you believe, as Robert Mueller does, that after 22 months you cannot say that Donald Trump did not commit crimes, how do you not take that document and pursue an investigation into those crimes that Robert Mueller found and details in his report? How do you not bring, the Justice Department had entertained the possibility that after the Mueller report became public, the underlying evidence and the witnesses, that it would be turned over to a congressional process, Frank.
Yeah, so look, let me add yet another reason for impeachment, not only because we clearly have at least 10 incidences described in the report of obstruction, but now we have a president who is essentially walking away from the founding principle of our government, which is that we have 3 equal branches of government and that the American people hold the executive accountable through their elected legislative branch. And he's rejecting that by stonewalling every possible attempt at oversight. That alone is enough to bring impeachment proceedings against the president who's saying, I don't buy this form of government anymore. So we're undergoing a stress test of almost unprecedented proportions of whether or not we're going to stick with 3 equal branches of government. And what we're going to find out is whether or not the legislative branch has any teeth to enforce their so-called equality. And if that fails, I'm not ready to say we're in that constitutional crisis, as Chairman Nadler is saying, but if the remedies fail and the enforcement fails, we'll be at a point where there is a crisis.
Joyce, let me just ask you to do the same thing. Leave the politics to us hacks here at the table, or just myself. I only call myself a hack. Leave the politics to me, and just lay out from your perspective the case for examining both the crimes alleged to have been committed by this president in by the Southern District of New York in that illegal hush money scheme, part of the reason that Michael Cohen now sits in a prison, and the crimes that Robert Mueller wrote in English language he could not exonerate Donald Trump from in the Mueller report.
You know, as you point out, I'm not a politician. I'm just sort of a little country prosecutor. And one of the things that I know from trying cases to juries for more than 25 years is that as a prosecutor, you have to make a hard-nosed call about whether your evidence is sufficient to convict with a jury in the jury pool that you will be drawing from. And so part of your calculation is to continue investigating until you have sufficient evidence. Impeachment is sort of a parallel process, right, where you're looking at the evidence you have available and thinking about whether or not it's enough. And Nancy Pelosi will look like a rocket scientist if in 1 month or 2 months that 40 to 45% jump in Americans who believe in impeachment is suddenly 45 to 50 or 55. And as you point out, she has really solid building blocks. The process that Democrats should be engaging now is this evidence gathering proposition. They should be looking not only at what's in the Mueller report, but what's in those 12 investigations that have been sent to other U.S. attorneys' offices, compiling evidence to make a decision about high crimes and misdemeanors.
Donnie.
I'm going to talk as a CEO. And as a CEO, this is all noise. I have a corporation, this country, in crisis. I only fix it if I get Trump out of office. Everything else is discussion. That is it. The world starts to collapse, and I work back from that. And until I get to the point that the evidence is so overwhelming that I'm going to bring impeachment process, and even if the Republicans shut it down, which they will, that the American public can clearly say, no, Donald Trump, they're not just going after him, he's not a victim. Until that point, strategically, I don't hit my end objective of getting to Trump. So I'm out of the political game, I'm out of the theoretical game. I'm in the one simple strategic objective, get this guy out. So until I can get an impeachment that even though it won't end in him being thrown out of office, the American public, as in sitting as jury, will go, no, this guy's guilty.
The only thing I would add to what Joyce said, and she knows 10,000 times more than I do, that accumulating evidence for a criminal trial is one thing. You know I have enough evidence to convict somebody of murder 1 or whatever. But remember, impeachment is a political trial. High crimes and misdemeanors. There is not a definition of that. No judge can say what that means. So what is sufficient evidence to get to the bar of high crimes and misdemeanors? Nobody knows. Sufficient evidence is the Congress taking that vote and saying, yes, we vote to impeach.
Let me give you the last word.
Bob Mueller uses the term substantial evidence repeatedly throughout there, substantial evidence. And the one thing I'd say, Donnie, I get your approach, but if you were CEO and the corporate bylaws required specific performance, you couldn't be in a position to ignore those just because they contradicted your end goal. And my point is the Constitution requires impeachment. Not everybody's going to agree with that, but I think the Constitution requires an impeachment proceeding right now.
So CEOs, members of Congress, mommies don't let little infractions go because you want the kid to get into college. I mean, I hear what you're saying, too, but I think you deal with the problem in front of your face, and the problem seems to be an abundant sort of
it's a Rubik's Cube.
picture, a mosaic of conduct worthy of heading down this path.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.